Yeah, so I was just gonna ask you a few questions about like kind of what you remember from your lifetime. This is the project for
Okay,
Apush. Okay,
okay.
so to start things off, I was thinking, what do you remember most from like kind of the World War II era? Do you remember anything?
Oh, oh, I sure do remember that. I mean, it's very much in my head because uh, it was, the major war that's
Yeah.
ever been. But fathers and uncles and brothers of friends of mine would go, and then you would see they would take I'm trying to think what would be put in the window. If it was a black, well, let's say the mother would start wearing a black armband, and that was a signal to tell you that her son had died.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and they would pull down the shade, and there'd be a star on it, meaning that. I really remember that. Um, I remember we used to have to go around, and well, you couldn't rubber. They needed rubber, and that's one of the things my father worked on. He was an engineer, was making latex because all the rubber had to go into the war effort, and
Yeah.
yeah, they needed the rubber, so they were trying to make latex, which was fake rubber. Um, and I remember the day the war was over, that I was walking down the street with a wagon, and I was collecting aluminum
Wow.
foil and bottle caps. And they used that. They needed the metal. And then, it came out that the war was over, and it was so exciting that the war
Yeah.
was over. Yeah. So, no, I really do remember it.
I was thinking maybe you could talk to me like, do you remember hearing about like Hiroshima and Nagasaki and like
Oh, absolutely.
what impact that had?
Absolutely. Yep, I sure do because, um, that was a tremendously big
Yeah, yeah, I
decision
can't
that
imagine
Truman
that.
had to make. And I was so happy he made it.
Yeah.
And I was a kid, but I was so happy he made it because it meant
Wow.
it was over. And they still talk about it now that thousands and thousands of more people on both sides would have died had that war not been over.
Oh no, I totally agree with that. And no one you knew anything about it up until it like finally happened. Like it was just that secret.
Oh, it was that secret. It was very top secret because my father had been offered. They wanted him to work on the Manhattan Project,
Wow,
and the
really?
Manhattan Project was the atomic bomb.
That's
Your
crazy.
grandfather or great grandfather, was a very, very smart man. Um, and it was over by the time he was leaving to
Wow.
go do that. Yeah.
And kind of moving out of the World War II era, I'm sure you remember pretty much everything about the Cold War. Um, could you just?
Yeah, the Cold War was a funny, funny thing because, um, let me see, I'm trying to think. Khrushchev, he was really an alcoholic. And
Really?
he came, yeah, he came to our country, and he sat there and he took his shoe off and was banging it on the desk
Wow.
when when he went to Congress talking. But
Really?
yeah, I remember that. But the Cold War, I don't know. I didn't feel as scared about that.
Yeah, that's what I was always kind of wondering. Like in the history books and lessons, you always hear about like this kind of like era of fear everyone's living under like on constantly. But
No,
yeah, see, that's what I was kind of wondering.
no, really, we knew. I'll tell you where there was fear though was when it came to Castro.
Yeah, yeah, I was about to ask you about that next.
Okay, because Steve was right at that age, and he, as a lawyer, could have gone into the adjutant general's lawyers, but he would have had to go as an officer for 2 years, or he
Wow.
could go for what was it, 6 months, and then he had to go every summer. He had to go away for a week to this army camp, and he had to go once a week down to the some big army building, which is difficult because he was a
Yeah.
beginning player, but he picked to do that. But for that Castro, I mean, there really was a time where we did not know if that guy was going to make it, that the bomb was going to be pushed.
So, what I was saying next about the missile crisis, was it really like that intense?
It was.
It was that.
It was.
Do you remember just?
Well, I can tell you, it was like if people were playing with, it was JFK, and it was like, and Bobby Kennedy, his brother, they were very, very close. And Bobby was known to be more of a hothead. No, he wasn't. He was the Attorney General, but he and his brother were very close. And JFK was the one who had to make the call.
Yeah.
But it came that close.
Wow.
It did come that close. Yes, it did. And then there would have been more, but it would have been Russia and because it was Cuba was being backed by the communists.
Okay. Also, this is also goes along with the idea of the Cold War. I think my dad might understand this. Maybe my mom a little bit because they were pretty young. But could you describe to me U.S. culture at the time of the Vietnam War? Was it very divided?
Yeah. It was a decided culture. Now, let me see. That was the end of the 60s, 70s.
Yes.
And I tell you, it was the most peculiar thing because these, I never could understand this because it was so cruel. The guys who went off to fight, and some of them were like ROTC, some of them were commissioned officers, and some of them were like kids when I taught. I only taught for 6 months. But listen, they had nothing in their life, and they weren't smart, and to go into the army was their dream. And they were going to go and be macerated. There was just no getting around it because we really. I don't think it's discussed too much anymore, but we really didn't have any business being there. It was done more as a
containment.
They called it the industrial something or other complex, meaning we had lots of people who made lots of money and had jobs because they're making airplanes.
Exactly.
But it had nothing to do that we really had business being over there.
Okay. Also, I just had to ask you, what would you say throughout your entire life and throughout American history impacted you the most? What was the watershed moment for you?
In history?
Yeah, throughout your lifetime.
Well, I tell you, the one thing that immediately comes to my mind was JFK being assassinated.
Oh, yes, of course.
There had been none of that, and I mean, it was boggling.
Yeah.
It just was not in our psyche whatsoever.
Do you remember where you were when you heard the news?
I do, absolutely. I remember. I'm trying to think if it was your mother. I think it was Pamela. It was Pamela. And was in the baby carriage, and I'm walking, I'm in this apartment, and I'm going up in the elevator. I get up, and my neighbor comes out and says to me, "Did you hear? Did you hear?" And I mean, it was just, it's like you heard, but you were just overwhelmed.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah, so that's one thing that's very unforgettable.
Okay, so those are kind of the main events I wanted to discuss because obviously they're really important to the history of our country, and it's just very interesting to see that you kind of lived through all of that. So
it is.
Yeah.
Because for you, it's something. Which would have been like me. Now the Civil War was too much farther back, but I mean, it didn't really occur while I was alive.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. And there's such a feeling of, oh yeah, I was there. I mean, I still even the Second World War was very aware of what was going on.
Really?
Oh yeah, they would have air raids, and every neighborhood had a warden, and all the lights went out, and
Wow.
all the lights were turned out, and then these air raid wardens would go out and they'd check that everything was okay. But it was really quite something.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like that too. Like looking back, like in the moment, it doesn't seem like this is gonna like change history forever. But looking back on it, you see like what impact it really had, considering
Yeah,
how it's
yeah.
changed. Yeah, like the course of our nation. So
Oh, yeah, and it affects the psyche too there's still now. In fact, I'm reading a World War II book right now, a novel, but it seems like right now there's a run on novels about that period of time, and
yeah,
there haven't been for about 15 years, say, but there's a whole run on them, and it's like I was just thinking the other day, it's kind of like I'm hooked on them. It's like I never really could, oh, comprehend it because
yeah,
it's incomprehensible. But the other thing is where I lived, there was a very large home that was next door to ours that had a tennis court and a swimming pool. And the people who owned it were very well-to-do, and they came down and they stayed in their place in Florida, and they rented this house to officers, young officers in the I don't know what service they were, but I used to call them the young men. And I just thought they were heavenly. I thought they were, they were probably in their 20s. And then they would have on Saturday night, like their girlfriends would come, and they'd have big parties, and they'd be
oh
doing,
really?
yeah, like Frank Sinatra kind of music,
Yeah,
and then what they call it, jazz, where they throw the person over their shoulder and stuff like that, bebop, and it was very romantic to me.
yeah.
I called them the young men. My parents had to make very sure I didn't go over there and fall in the swimming pool.
Anyway, I just want to thank you so much for doing this. It's been great to talk to you.
Oh, it's great to talk to you, my dear.
And I'll probably see you again soon.
How's everything going?
What?
How's everything going with you?